Anti-corruption prosecutors in Ukraine said this week there was no evidence Manafort received illicit payments. Rena, a spokesman, said Manafort is not under Justice Department investigation and is cooperating with House and Senate Russia inquiries.
Major, I want to ask you about the White House press briefing Wednesday. Sarah Huckabee Sanders called Paul Manafort's filing as a foreign agent a campaign issue. Do you think President Trump will ever be able to separate himself from his former campaign chair?
Well, let's just take this one at a time, Rena. Calling Paul Manafort a campaign issue tries to distance the White House from its very intense involvement during the campaign with Paul Manafort and its continued cooperation with Manafort as an informal advisor during the transition leading up to the inauguration of President Trump. And Rick Gates, as I mentioned in my piece just a moment ago, who was Paul Manafort's only employee in Ukraine working for the Party of Regions, was a significant member and fundraiser for the entire Trump inaugural committee. So it's very difficult to separate this White House from these two figures. Now, it's also important to point out, as I just did, those prosecutors in Ukraine said this week, no evidence that Manafort received illicit payments. And there's been no suggestion that either Gates or Manafort are under active or even initial Justice Department investigation. So we need to be careful about what is or isn't true in this story. And one other point, Rena, you said in the lead-in something that is true. Paul Manafort broke the law by not registering as a foreign agent. But there are almost no prosecutions by the Justice Department of a breach of law of that kind. What the Justice Department typically does, and what it has been involved in conversations with Manafort about since September of last year, is reviewing his business records and then retroactively complying with this foreign agent registry requirement of the law. And it appears that's what Manafort is trying to accomplish. But this Russia story continues to dog the Trump White House. It continues to be a sore point in its relationship. It's continuously and intensely contentious relationship with the White House press corps, and probably will be for the foreseeable future.
As you mentioned Russia and that relationship, we know Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, said Wednesday that President Vladimir Putin and President Trump will probably meet at the G20 summit next week. How is the White House preparing for that event, Major?
Well, trying to prepare for what constitutes a meeting and what, if there is a formal sit-down meeting, what would the agenda be? And let's be careful with what Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, said. He said something that is patently obvious. Putin and Mr. Trump will be at the same place, at the same time, in the same venue, right next to her, or very physically close to each other, at these general meetings. So the chance of them getting together, it could only be very briefly, is almost impossible to rule out. That is all technically true. What the two nations are still deliberating, and here at the White House, we've been given no absolute assurances one way or the other if there will be a substantive meeting between the United States and Russia in the personages of President Trump and President Putin. But if there is, a key topic will have to be Syria, and what was announced this week by the White House, a preliminary statement of the Syrian government. We think you're preparing for a chemical weapons attack, and if you wage one, there will be severe military repercussions. We are told here at the White House arena that statement was as much designed to impress upon the gravity of the situation the Syrian regime led by Bashar al-Assad as it was a message to Russia, one of Syria's most important military and diplomatic backers in the region. So that would be a key issue if there's a substantive meeting, in addition to all the other things that make the relationship between the United States and Russia contentious right now. So no confirmation of a meeting, and if there is one, no word yet on what the agenda might or might not be.
Major Garrett at the White House. Major, thank you.
Sure.